All right, Andy, we're gonna try not to get you killed this morning as you're like trying to drive or be in a motor vehicle as you're heading to the. Are you going to the airport? Where are you
I
going?
am, Dave. I am. I'm on the road enjoying all the pleasantries of driving in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and I am heading to the airport.
You going to Dulles? Is that where you're going, or are you going to?
No, I wish I was. I live close by to Dulles Airport. I wish I was. I'm going to Reagan National Airport, Dave, in beautiful Washington, D.C.
I kind of liked Reagan when I went in there last time. I hadn't been in Reagan in probably it must have been like 20 years, close to 20 years. It's pretty nice now. It would seem pretty nice. So
It's all right. I would take Dulles, which is nice. So it
yeah,
makes my for travel purposes, it's usually more effective. It's a little bit further away.
okay. Well, there you
Yep.
go. Yeah.
Yep.
When I was in the area. Um, I always tried to do BWI because I was only like 20 minutes from the airport, but I never wanted to come down Dulles or Reagan. But yeah, good times have I all. So a good weekend did you have, Andy?
A good weekend I did have, David. I feel like we're talking like Yoda right now. Yeah, I did. I had a good weekend. We did some of that Christmas decorating. I've got a little bit more to do when I get back from this trip. But it was a good weekend, a good weekend of football, a good weekend of productivity, good weekend of working out. All around, Dave, a pretty successful weekend. How about you? I think you were out Christmas tree shopping. I think you said you were going to be doing this weekend.
We did go Christmas tree shopping. We got our Christmas tree. Andy, we also got a dog, I think. So
Oh,
uh,
okay, all right.
I might have to save that story for a little bit later, but yeah, we did get our Christmas tree. It was really fun. We had a good adventure. It's about 2 hours away into a little bit of mountains. I was worried because the Hurricane Helene had gotten up in that area too, but
Yeah.
thankfully, um, they were not as impacted as other places. I had a really fun time. I enjoy cutting down the Christmas tree. It wasn't quite like, we don't actually cut it down. We go find the tree, then we signal the guys to come around and chop it down. But it was a good time. We had a good time. It's always good family time to do that. And then we put up our tree and then we put the lights around it. We're going to decorate it probably this weekend. But we're all festive out here in the Pounder household for sure. So
I'm excited for you. I used to enjoy that. We used to go and we can chop down our tree. We go and pick it out. Typically, my father and my brother and I would go and pick out the Christmas tree, and sometimes they would chop it down. Sometimes it would be just already cut, just like lined up, and you pick yours. But it was a fun part of the Christmas tradition for me growing up. We don't do that in my home anymore, but I always enjoyed that. And the smell of that fresh tree, and
yeah.
it's just a fun part of the season. So I'm glad you guys got to do that. I'm very curious about this dog story, so I look forward to hearing about that.
Okay, well, let me get. We're gonna actually pick the dog up this today, so I might save that for a Wednesday conversation. We've got a lot to get into today, Andy. People, if you're watching us on watching this podcast, you won't see the 7 minute timer come up. I have the timer on my phone, so we'll just start getting into it, Andy. You'll just have to trust me that we're close to 7 minutes. Okay, so just bear with me. All right. Okay, Andy, let's start with NFL. Big weekend again. A couple huge games that I didn't think were going to be very interesting turned out to be very interesting. A lot of a couple divisions were clinched. The Chiefs had another like unbelievable win again at the last second, a doinking into a field goal doinked in. It was pretty amazing. And I think Andy's cut out on us here, or maybe he is. Andy, you still there?
I am, dude. I was sorry. No, what happened? I think I did a wormhole for a minute there. Sorry about that. My bad.
Okay, well there you go. This is the adventures we're gonna have today with you driving in. But Andy, any big takeaways for you on the NFL week? I mean, your Lions played on Thursday. You had a big win. You could sit back and relax.
Yeah.
My Cowboys play tonight, which I'm not even probably gonna watch. So any big takeaways for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, there were some interesting ones. I mean, the I'll give the Panthers credit for getting better all season long
Yeah.
and playing a good football game against Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles played good football. The Panthers kept up for the most part. They were playing good football too. So they're still not a good team at all, but they're showing the potential to not be a terrible team. And that was really great to see. Meanwhile, in New York, got two really god awful teams. And
God awful.
I mean, god awful. The Giants are absolutely abysmal. They are an awful, awful. I don't even know where they're going to start to try to rebuild that team. It is not an NFL franchise right now. And the Jets, I mean, the Jets really tried. They tied it up. They took it to overtime. Aaron Rodgers finally going to get a win. Jets were finally going to get a win in Miami. But lo and behold, Dolphins win the coin toss. The Dolphins win the game. I loved watching the Jets lose again. And then, Dave, I think the Buffalo Bills, I mean, goodness gracious, Josh Allen is just a beast. I mean, he really is a great football player. The Rams defense seems to be horrible, but that was a wild shootout. The Buffalo Bills are coming to Detroit next week, and I'm not sure what to expect. I thought we're going to put up 100 points in that game, or the Rams defense was just really bad, but definitely the Buffalo Bills can score points, and Josh Allen is going to get the end zone.
I tell you, he's the MVP, I think, Andy. The guy's been amazing this year. He's been a complete beast. Look, they don't have like a ton of like weapons necessarily. He just makes it all happen. And so I've been very impressed with that. You mentioned the Panthers too, Andy. They had a chance. They dropped a touchdown pass in the under a minute left
Yeah,
that could have won them the game there. Andy, let's I just real quickly, they're not, you're right. I mean, they're still a tough team here. They're 3-10, but the last 4 weeks of games, they played really tight. They actually 5 weeks, they beat the Saints and Giants, which are easy to do, right? But they lost to the Chiefs by 3, Buccaneers by 3, and then the Eagles, where they had the game-winning touchdown. Andy, their last four, they play the Cowboys, which they're going to win. They play the Cardinals, which they can win. They play the Buccaneers, which they'll probably lose that game, but it'll probably be close. And then they end on the Falcons, which are in a free fall right now.
yeah,
Andy,
yeah.
I mean, the Falcons are at. I mean, uh, Kirk Cousins went back to Minnesota and only to see Sam Darnold, the former Jet, by the way. How ironic is that? I mean, the former Jet first round draft pick, and he's at 11-2 for the Minnesota Vikings and throws for 5 touchdown passes. And Kirk Cousins is now 4 weeks in, Andy, 4 straight weeks, no touchdowns, 8 interceptions. They might want to start playing Michael Penix Jr. because their season is almost over. So it's going to be an interesting time, Andy.
It is. It was really. I was counting on the Falcons yesterday because I was hoping to get a little bit of distance between the Lions and the Vikings, and that didn't happen. My youngest son and I were talking. He made a really sort of funny observation that who would have guessed 2 years ago that Sam Darnold would be leading a 10-2 Minnesota Vikings team, that Aaron Rodgers would be leading an abysmal New York Jets team, and that Kirk Cousins would be on the Atlanta Falcons chucking the ball. I mean, it's been a very interesting couple of years for quarterback moves in the NFL. And you're right. I mean, Cousins is really struggling, and Darnold is. You know, it's still hard to tell how good the Vikings are or aren't. I'm looking forward to the Lions playing them again, but they're winning football games and they're biting the heels of the Lions, just like the Eagles are, just like the Packers are. The NFC is a it's a hot race. It's a hot race to
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to go back because I've mentioned this a couple times on this podcast. It just speaks to what a good coach will do.
Yeah,
Look, I mean, Sam Darnold did not all of a sudden become an elite quarterback. He was a good quarterback who just needed the right coaching. Didn't get it in the Jets. He played semi decent in Carolina, where they had a pretty good coaching staff, but they just couldn't win. Then he goes to San Francisco, and Kyle Shanahan makes him the backup, and that's good coaching there. Then goes to Minnesota, and you got is it I can't remember. It's Kevin O'Connell or
yeah.
O'Connor, but
O'Connell.
O'Connell. But this is a guy who knows how to head coach. That Vikings team was supposed to be rebuilding this year with a rookie quarterback. The rookie quarterback hurts himself in the preseason, so Sam Darnold comes in. At the best, you would think maybe a 9-8 team, may or 7-10. Andy, 11-2, they're one game behind your now injury depleted Lions. I mean, this is an amazing race in there. Unbelievable.
It really is, David. You know, coaching is, I think, one of the good stories of the NFL this year. I think, you know, running backs, I think, have had a great year in the NFL this year. I'm glad to see the position getting a little bit of respect and appreciation. And I think coaching, the difference between, you know, game managers and coaches is really, really big. And, I read an article where somebody was trying to sort of fillet Dan Campbell that, his going for a fourth down is reckless and it's going to kill him. Look, he trusts his team. He's
Yeah.
coached his team. He's got confidence in his team. You're going to lose sometimes when you gamble like that. I mean, but you're going to lose on third down too. And so he plays the odds. He trusts his team. I think he's shown what a strong coach can do. I think he's in the running for Coach of the Year. I think Minnesota definitely is in running for Coach of the Year because you're right. That team was picked to be basement dwellers this season behind the Chicago Bears, the NFC North, not even scoring a handful of wins. They're doing great. And I'm not a Vikings fan because they play the Lions twice a year. I'm not excited to see what that team is doing. And Dave, Mike Tomlin, once again, will have a positive record, has never had a non-winning season. He resurrected the career of Russell Wilson, who's probably going to be the starter for the Steelers next year. And that team is playing legitimately good football and has a chance to not only go into the playoffs, but actually try and make a push in the AFC. It is a great season for good coaches. Meanwhile, you've got Dallas. Meanwhile, you've got Chicago. And you've got some other teams that are really struggling to say, like, what is your team doing? What is your GM doing? What is your coach doing? And it kills the team. And I think coaching is a really big story of this NFL season.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So it is speaks to a lot of that as well. Andy, well said. Well said. Okay, Andy, let's go into our next topic today. The 7-minute timer is up. I'm going to go to the next one. Andy, we don't often talk about like world events or geopolitics a whole lot on this podcast. We have another podcast that we talk a lot about other things on, Andy. But look, I think it's important that we talk about what's happened in Syria, especially over this weekend. This has been part of a 14-year civil war that most people have forgotten about because for the better part of the last, I would say half of it, it's been pretty quiet over there. I mean, not that things haven't been happening, but all of a sudden over the last 2 weeks, Syrian rebels had started making headroads into some of the big areas. They took most notably Homs, which is the second largest city in Syria, about a week ago. And everyone was like, wow, they're going to make a press here. This is an offensive. This is interesting, especially when you give context to what Israel was engaged with Hamas and Hezbollah and even Iran. And then also with Russia being heavily involved in the Ukraine. All of their forces are diverted there because if you'll remember, in part of the Syrian civil war, Syria was getting a lot of support from Russia in the terms of fighter air support, advisors, military support on a lot of levels, and also from Iran, who was doing giving their proxies a lot of work and also supporting militarily with their Quds force. Andy, it's been a remarkable change of events because I woke up Sunday morning and all of a sudden Syria has fallen. Assad, the president there, the family that's been in charge for over 50 years there, has fled the country, or nobody knows where he's at, but presumably he's fled the country somewhere. And the rebel forces have taken over to the point where the prime minister of Syria has pledged to support the government has pledged to support in any way possible this transition to the new government. It's been remarkable, one, in how fast it went, and then two, how open people are to just the rebels made it very clear. Do not destroy institutions. We need these institutions. No retribution. Let's just take over and start running this country. What did you think Sunday morning, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it really was pretty incredible. Like I said, it really developed rapidly, late last week. And Dave, what I think is one of the most consequential weeks in power to the people we've had in a long time. I mean, I wrote about it this weekend. We talked about it some last week. I mean, South Korea,
Yeah.
Romania, France, and then Syria. I mean, phenomenal change of events, that represented in large part the will of the people. And it was phenomenal. And Syria is different for sure, and I'll come right back to that. But really, an incredible week that because here in the U.S. we're so consumed with what is Donald Trump saying on True Social. Like I think just people aren't fully aware of, or they haven't been paying attention to Syria for the last 5 years. and also it's like what's happening in Syria. It's just an incredible turn of events. So Assad is now he's in Moscow, unsurprisingly, right? He's been granted asylum in Moscow, and from one standpoint, I have to like wonder how much did Joe Biden and his administration know of what was developing on the ground? Was it in any way supported, by the U.S.? He spoke yesterday about, synchronized sort of attacks against the Islamic State as this unfolded, make sure they can't take control in any way. So I am curious if this wasn't like one of Biden's, farewell hurrahs to poke Putin in the eye one more time. Right? This was a loss for Russia. This was a loss for Iran. I can't say it was a win for the U.S. yet, but it's an exciting time because the people of Syria have long suffered underneath that regime. They've been wanting change. A lot of the expatriates who have left Syria have been yearning for change, and people just didn't think it was going to happen. It looked like this was more or less, done in a stalemate, and then all of a sudden, everything changed, which is just phenomenal. And we think these things don't happen this way, but they do, and they can happen anywhere. Like rapid change can occur, and you guys should be paying attention. Like Ferris Bueller said, if you don't stop to look around once in a while, you might miss it. And I think a lot of people missed it on Syria. So, very interesting for the U.S. I'm not actually 100% sure what to think of the incoming folks. Right, there are ties to this group and the leader to Al Qaeda. That's a concern. Historically, you're replacing thuggish strongmen in the Middle East and North Africa while you don't want to see those guys in power, right? Gaddafi was terrible, Hussein was terrible, leaders across the region were terrible, and like you want them to go, but you don't really know what's going to follow. And sometimes what follows can be even worse. We saw that, in George W. Bush's crap leadership, what unfolded in Iraq after the elimination of Saddam Hussein was a mess. It was the Islamic State, it was terrorism, and we're still suffering the poor decisions and what happened after that. Similarly in Syria, like I'm not ready to go rah rah. Here's a new leadership. Let's go. But at the same time, things change, people change, circumstances change, and the fact that there is some historical alignment with Al Qaeda doesn't necessarily mean that's where these guys are today, nor do they want to come in and put an Islamic regime into place in Syria. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic and hope for the best. Like you said, there was a deliberate effort to not destroy the country, just to seize power. And like now, let's see what happens next. And I hope it's a long overdue good story for the Syrian people. But let's wait and see, because unfortunately these events sometimes go really badly after what looks like positive change. So I hope the administration can help along in these next couple of weeks. The Trump administration has basically said we should just stay out of Syria altogether. I don't know what that means from a political standpoint. Once Mr. Trump comes into office. So there's a lot of things that can happen in the coming months, but an exciting moment for the Syrian people, and getting liberated from their thuggish leader is, I think, hopefully going to be a net win.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's what's next is going to be the key piece, right? This is a country who's been beset by war for the last 14 years. The important part is let's get back to what was normal. I mean, what is amazing about the Middle East, Andy, and again, being in Iraq ourselves and so on, is this is an area of the world that is so rich in history. It's the bread basket, it's a basket of civilization in so many different ways. There's so much history rooted here, and it would be great to see that come back to life again. And I think my hope is that with more moderate governments in that region, you can bring that back. It's been so beset by conflict for so long now. Let's I'm going to choose to look optimistically that this can be a good thing, but it requires a lot of work, and things that have eluded people for decades now, centuries, and hopefully we can get back to some level here. But this is obviously a positive change. I'm encouraged about the government transition at some point saying, "Hey, let's we need these facilities and government agencies to work. So let's work with those and we can build out that leadership from there. But hopefully, the Syrian people, this will be the opportunity to recover and rebuild in a way that really brings that region back. So, all good stuff all around, Andy. All right, we got one more topic here, Andy, before you get to the airport. Andy, I think we'll talk about let's go with an interview the president elect had yesterday, his first real interview since winning the election. He was on NBC's Meet the Press, and he talked a lot about a lot of things. The president elect is now, he was in Paris over the weekend talking with the leadership of Europe as they were going through a lot of different held some meetings over the last couple of weeks. So he's been actively engaged. We obviously know what is happening with his political cabinet and everything. But he had a couple comments here, Andy, on Meet the Press, talking about, immigration, talking about pardons, talking about his, retribution, I guess, for, taking, going back in it. Famously, Trump had said, day one he's going to be a dictator, and everybody was like, "Uh-oh, he's going to come in and start going after some of his former enemies or those who worked against him." But he also talked about immigration and how he's going to carry out these mass deportations, giving a little bit of efforts there, mostly focusing on criminals, but again, reminding people that they were here illegally, so we have to do something to if they want to go through the right way. Andy, there's a couple other topics to get into, but what were your initial thoughts when you saw some of this, all these talking points coming out?
Yeah, I mean, he's hard to read, Dave, because he says things and he's sort of tempering down his comments a little bit, where he's talking about how he and the Republican Party support dreamers, for example, and then people that
Yeah,
make
yeah,
this country, they want to find a way for them to stay in this country, and he talks about not separating families by deporting entire families and sort of going against birthright citizenship. He is either misinformed or lies about certain things still, like saying that we're the only country that grants birthright citizenship. That's 100% not true. I think some 35, 36 countries do that. It's not unique to the United States. And so it's hard to read exactly where he's going. Is he trying to moderate his comments a little bit just to be more presentable and get a little bit more acceptance for his upcoming policies? He also said some things that were sort of like what do you say here, man? He's like, hey, I'm not going to tell the Department of
yeah.
Justice or the FBI to prosecute my enemies, but if they decide to do it, so be it, right? And then also throw in that I think Liz Cheney should be in jail. So it's like well, like what are you saying, man? So he is going to try and be a good president, right? I mean, he wants to be a great president. He wants to be a historical president. He wants to be the greatest president since and surpass George Washington, which he will never do, certainly. But can Donald Trump be a good president? Like maybe, like he could be potentially, but he certainly makes it hard to believe him when he says things because he sort of throws in these little sayings and phrases that make it more complicated. So I think it's a wait and see moment, Dave. I think his comments were there's some good things said, some questionable things said. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key. I mean, there's so much talk and buzz around what he says, and I think people often forget is like we do have laws in this country, and the president is, despite what maybe some think, the president isn't above the law, and he has to still adhere to some of these things. Government agencies can't just go do things; they have to have real reasons to do that. And so I think there's so much about him that's so noisy and so distracting.
Yeah.
He did the same thing before, right? I mean, he talked about we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it and we're going to do all these things and none of that stuff came true, right? I mean, he tried to do things and some of it good, some of it awful and some of it, just never amounted to anything. So it's going to be 4 years of cutting through all of that noise to find out what really can be done. And I think if anything, what, even the first couple weeks of even his own nominees going through this process for cabinet positions, at the end of the day, the people who are really outrageous are going to go through a very tough process. and not all of them are going to make through it. Like, look at Matt Gaetz already. He's a fucking asshole, and so everybody knew it, and they threw him out there. And guess what? He's no longer going to be it because nobody wanted him. The same thing with Heggs. What, I can't even say his last name. I don't
Like
even.
I said,
I can't even. I don't even want to say his last name. It doesn't look like he's going to make his way through here. I mean, and so everybody who gets so upset and wrangled about these things, let's see the process play out and take it. But this is what the next 4 years is going to be, Andy. It's what we had from 2016 to 2020. I guess it is what it is, right?
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, Congress's interest to go beyond Donald Trump's presidency. There's going to be some, some tempering down of things there. We have laws, institutions, we have an executive branch, that goes beyond the presidency. Just like with Nixon, right? It sort of helped bring down some of the president's wilder ambitions. At the end of the day, Dave, I trust in the American people. I trust our democratic institutions. I do think Donald Trump can threaten some of that, but at the end of the day, I think we will get through whatever chaos Donald Trump brings, and we will survive. And America will continue, and we'll get through this. And Dave, maybe he'll do some good things along the way. I'm not going to rule
Sure.
that possibility out. There's potential, and I'm going to be hopeful and optimistic because I want America to succeed, regardless of who's in the White House.
There you go. Andy, I think that's probably a good way to wrap up. I think you're probably getting close to where you need to be at anyways at the airport. And we'll give you that time to break away freely. So, Andy, really appreciate you taking the time, and we didn't kill you. That was good, right? I think
That's
that's
good. Yeah,
good.
I appreciate that.
No fender benders or anything like that. That would have been probably a good podcast moment, but not a good not a good personal and Andy Jabor moment, probably.
Thanks,
So
Dave. Happy Monday to you, and to those that are listening. Happy second week of December. It's an exciting time of the year, Dave. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
it's the most wonderful time of the year. All right, Andy, you got me singing. All right, with that, be safe for on your travels, Andy, and we'll catch up with you on Wednesday.
Thanks, Dave.